Hey, happy Friday. Welcome back to MetFlex and Chill. This is Rachel Gregory, your host, and today we have a Q&A episode. So before we jump into the questions for today, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor for the month of November for all Friday episodes. So our sponsor is UCAN. You've probably heard me talk about UCAN in the past if you've been following me for a while. It's a product that I've been using personally for a while, and I'm really excited to have them on as a sponsor. So if you don't know about UCAN has a patented ingredient called superstarch, which is a unique, slow-releasing, complex carbohydrate that doesn't spike blood sugar, and it actually delivers a slow and steady release of glucose into the bloodstream. So it doesn't cause a significant rise in blood insulin levels, which permits greater use of fat for fuel relative to some other carb sources. So it's definitely a great fuel source, especially if you're fat adapted or you're following a lower carb or a keto approach, and maybe you're looking for something for an extra boost during your workouts or before your workouts. So personally, since I started using UCAN, I would say it's been probably over a year now. I use it as a pre-workout drink and kind of sip on it into my workout. I've noticed a significant boost in performance, especially towards the end of my workouts when obviously fatigue starts to set in. So I generally use UCAN. I use the drinks, and sometimes I have the bars as well. I'll chat a little bit more about how I use their product in future episodes this month. But if you are interested in checking them out, you can go to, I'll link the website in the description, and you can learn more about them, learn more about the different products they offer. And you can also use the code METFLEXLIFE for 20% off if you want to try them out. Again, I'll link their website in the show notes. You can just swipe up if you're listening to this on iTunes, or view the read more button if you're listening to it on another platform. So I'm excited to have them for the sponsor for this month. And like I said, I'll chat more about them as we go through future episodes. All right, let's jump into the questions for today's episode. All right, first question, how do you determine how much rest to take during sets during a workout? Okay, this is a great question, and actually came from one of my prior clients, Sybil. Shout out to you for being awesome. So the biggest thing to think about here is, first, what is the goal of the workout, right? So what's the outcome you're trying to achieve? And this will determine really kind of how you go into the workout in general, and then obviously how much rest you're taking in between your sets and reps and all of that. So the biggest thing, is the focus on building muscle or strength versus is the focus on maybe you're looking to improve, maybe you're doing a conditioning workout or a cardio workout or, something like a Metcon or something like that. So obviously we're distinguishing between those, because if you're looking for, more conditioning or metabolic work, that's going to be obviously, you're not going to be taking as much rest for that, and you're probably going to be following like a set time frame for that, versus what I think you're asking for this question is more so on the lines of obviously building muscle and strength and kind of traditional working sets, and how much rest you should take during your lifting sets. So I just want to distinguish between that first, because it obviously depends what you're trying to get out of the workout, right? So if the main goal is to, either build muscle or strength, I think the biggest thing within that is to look at, okay, what part of your workout are you in, right? So for example, when I'm programming for clients, we always start with our compound lifts first. And we start with the bigger muscle groups first, and then we work our way into more accessory or isolation movements, which are going to be more like smaller muscle groups. So when I say that this is the focus here, or when I say that we need to focus on, what part of your workout you're in, is because you're usually during the compound lifts, and usually when you are performing a movement that is a compound lift and it's a bigger muscle group or multiple muscle groups, you're probably going to want to take a little bit more rest in between those, just because you are using more muscles and you are taxing your nervous system a little bit more. And so it's going to probably take you a little bit longer to recover before your next set, versus if you were doing, an accessory movement or an isolation movement where you were using smaller muscle groups and they don't take as much time to recover between sets. So I guess like a general rule of thumb with compound movements, or when you're performing a movement that, is using bigger muscle groups, say, for example, squats, deadlifts, like an overhead press, bench press, things like that, I would say generally around 2 to 3 minutes is a good place to be in terms of rest between those sets. And then when we're talking more like isolation or accessory movements, so things like bicep curls or tricep work, or, isolation exercises in the sense of, you're isolating your quads, you're isolating your hamstrings. With those exercises, you're using smaller groups. It's not as taxing on your nervous system. So you won't feel as much fatigue usually, in the sense of whole body fatigue, where it takes longer to recover from. So with those isolation and accessory movements, usually around 1 to 2 minutes is a kind of good rule of thumb for those. And then if you're doing supersets, it would be a little bit different. Supersets are a really great, I guess you could say, tool to use if you're low on time, because you can actually train antagonistic muscles with shorter rest periods. So I don't think there's really an advantage personally, I don't think there's an advantage of supersets in the sense of, building more muscle or building more strength. It's more so just something that allows you to get through your workout faster, and still, perform the same quality of work, in the sense that you are hopefully, putting supersets with antagonistic muscles, right? So you'd be doing the opposite movement pattern or the opposite muscle group and taking pretty much like sometimes a little bit rest, maybe no rest at all between movements. So for example, biceps and triceps, if you're doing like biceps curls or tricep push downs, you would go, you'd go through your bicep set and then go right into your tricep set, and then you'd rest after that superset. Obviously you can do this with, other accessory movements or isolation movements like your quads and hamstrings. Those are antagonistic muscles. So that's one way to, actually make your workout a little bit shorter, but still get a good quality work out of your workout, if that makes sense. So the only thing that I would say with this though, and with supersets, is that you need to be careful that you're not doing supersets with everything, especially when you're training legs. So you probably wouldn't want to do like a squat that's supersetted with an RDL, because, although a squat can be more quad dominant, you're still using your glutes, your hamstrings, your back, all of those, the muscles there during this movement, right? And even though, for example, an RDL is primarily hamstrings, you're still, again, engaging your glutes, your core, your low back. All of those are being worked in the squat as well, and in the RDL. So without proper rest between these types of exercises, you might not be getting as much out of them as you could. And the injury risk can be a little bit higher when you're talking about, lower body supersets versus, especially with compound movements, versus, isolation movements, especially in the upper body. So, unless they're more isolation based lower body workout or lower body movements or exercises, such as a leg extension supersetted with maybe a hamstring curl where you're specifically isolating your quads and your hamstrings, I would just be careful, because sometimes that can turn more into a metabolic workout or more into Metcon or something like that, instead of, truly giving yourself enough rest between your sets to get as much out of what the goal is, which, when we're talking about this question, it's, building muscle or building strength. So the biggest thing here too is to think about, your rest periods and like, are you actually timing them? Because sometimes for me, if I don't time my rest periods, and also if I can definitely get distracted if I have my phone with me. That's something I've been working on lately, and actually for a long time, is to actually put my phone on silent and do not disturb during my workouts, because it's so easy to, between those squats, between those 2 to 3 minutes that I'm resting to, go on Instagram and scroll there or respond to a text message. So I would say if you have trouble maybe in the opposite direction, in the sense of maybe you're resting for too long, maybe your rest periods turn into like 5-10 minutes between sets. That's pretty long time, but it can happen, especially if you are, scrolling through your phone and stuff like that. I would just, be cognizant of that and set a timer. So for me, what I do is I have my Apple Watch on and I will set rest period times, either just by looking at my watch, right when I finish exercise and say, okay, in 3 minutes, I'm going to do my next set. Or if I actually, there's an app, I believe it's called Gymboss. It's a free app and you can set rest periods. You can set rest and work periods. So that's a really good option as well. That's a really good tool to use too. Like if you're doing a Metcon style workout, or if you're doing a finisher or something for time, that's a good app. It's called Gymboss. I think it's still available. And it should be free. So definitely check that out. But again, you definitely just want to pay attention to, feeling recovered going into that next set. So again, unless you're specifically doing a Metcon or a metabolic type training session, you want to make sure that you're giving yourself adequate rest between each set so you can get the most out of each set you're performing. Because if the goal is to build muscle or to build strength, you want to make sure that you're going into each set as recovered as possible so that you can perform your best during that set. So hopefully that answers your question. And yeah, again, shout out to Sybil, one of my clients, for asking this question. Thanks so much. All right, next question. When you feel like you've built the muscle you want, should you break and do a period of cardio? Okay, so this is kind of a tough one to answer because I think it just really just depends on what your goal is, right? So say you've been going through maybe a hypertrophy phase for a while. You've been really focused on building as much muscle as possible, and you're kind of over it for now, and you want to focus on something else. Or like you said, you feel like you've built the muscle you want. What should the next focus be? So again, it just comes back to what your goal is and what you want to focus on next. So I would say in general, if you don't necessarily want to build any more muscle, but you just want to maintain the muscle you've built, you can definitely dial back your training. So for example, maybe if you were lifting 4 or 5 days a week, maybe you dial that back to 3 days a week or 2 days a week, and maybe focus on, some other goal, whether that's a cardio-based goal or another maybe performance or strength-based goal. So, for example, if it's a cardio-based goal and you want to focus on, maybe racing in a triathlon or a marathon or something like that, if that's a goal that you have, then this would for sure be the time to focus on that. Or it could be, instead of focus on actually building muscle and a hypertrophy training, you're focused more on strength training. And maybe you have a goal of, competing in a powerlifting competition or something like that, where you're focused on building more strength in, the lifts, squats, deadlifts, bench press, things like that. Or maybe you have a goal of trying out Olympic lifting or CrossFit or something like that. So again, it all comes back to what your next goal is, if you want to have one. But when it comes to, your question, you said when you feel like you've built the muscle you want, should you break into a period of cardio? I would say that, it depends. If the goal is more cardio based, then yeah, definitely, you'll probably have to incorporate some more cardio if it is, training for a race or something like that. And also if you just want to switch things up, but in terms of maintaining the muscle you've built, you can definitely do that without having to, I'd say, lift as much. So it's really we can, and studies have shown this, we can maintain our muscle mass, by doing, I believe it's even just 50 to 60% of the amount of work that we are doing to build the muscle. You can actually just do that same, about 50, 60%. I'm not sure if I'm exactly correct on these percentages, but around that to be able to, maintain the muscle you've built. And I think that's something that a lot of people, actually notice too, especially during quarantine. This is something we talked about a lot too, when all the gyms closed. It's you've been and I went through this too. I spent so much time, in my routine and focused on, building muscle and things like that. And then when my gym closed, I was like, oh crap, what am I going to do now? And I didn't obviously want to regress, but what I realized, and, as I did more research and as I learned more, you can definitely maintain your muscle and your, yeah, you can definitely maintain your muscle mass on a lot less volume and intensity than you would need to build. So hopefully that makes sense. But again, it just comes down to, what your overall goal is and what you want to focus on. And I would say, if you're bored, then try something new. Try something that, get a little bit uncomfortable. I talk about this all the time, especially recently, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. So try new things out, trying something out that maybe is scary. So maybe like, Olympic lifting is something that's you've never tried before. Maybe you hire a coach and try out some Olympic lifts like snatches and power cleans and things like that. Maybe go to a CrossFit gym. If you don't necessarily want to do CrossFit, I know a lot of CrossFit gyms have a lot of like just straight Olympic lifting classes. So you could try that out. You could have, you could do a race or train for a race or something like that. But anyway, hopefully that answers your question. Really just depends, what you want your next goal to be and, setting that goal and working towards it. So hopefully that made sense. If you have any follow-up questions, definitely reach out, let me know, and I'll be happy to answer them. All right, next question. I've been listening to your podcast specifically about carb cycling. I want to start incorporating this because I feel like I've stalled in my weight loss with keto and have incorporated heavier workouts. I'm a number-driven person, so when I do a carb cycle on those days that I do heavier workouts, is there a time frame or calorie burn that helps determine if it's a heavier workout? I know this may not be a cut and dry answer, but any help is appreciated. Okay, so great question. When you say heavier workouts, I don't know exactly if you mean, like heavier workouts. Heavier workouts in the sense of you're lifting heavier weights, or you're just heavier in the sense of doing more intense workouts. So I would probably start with incorporating carbs on the workouts or around the workouts that are more intense. So those higher intensity workouts, things like if you're doing HIIT training or metcons or workouts like that, where you're using a lot of the glycolytic system, which is the system in your body that uses glucose for fuel, or primarily glucose for fuel during those higher intensity bouts of exercise. That would probably be, the best place to start incorporating carbs if you haven't in a while, and if you're looking to incorporate carbs around a specific workout. And when you say a recommendation for, a number to focus on, whether that's a time frame or a calorie burn, I would personally focus more on, the number I would focus on is actually your heart rate. So I went into this on a previous episode. I talked all about using heart rate zones for training and how to use those zones to gauge how intense your workouts are. So definitely go back and check out, and I'll link this in the show notes, episode 58. It's titled Using Heart Rate Zones During Training, Deload Wheats, Protein Shakes, and Best Nutrition Book. So it has a few different topics within there, but heart rate zones is probably the bulk of the episode, and I dive into exactly what heart rate zones are, how to use them for your training. So I think that episode would really help in the sense of understanding like how, like you said, how do you know how heavy or how intense your workouts are. Using your heart rate is a really good gauge of that versus trying to, focus on a calorie burn or something like that. And it's easy to do this. You can just, for me, for example, and what I recommend in this episode is, if you have an Apple Watch, you can track your heart rate using that. If you have a Fitbit, you can use that. Or if you have like a Garmin heart rate monitor, I feel like those aren't as popular anymore just because the Apple Watches and Fitbits are so, they've, over the last few years, they're so high tech now that you can just tell your heart rate on your wrist. So that's a really good tool to use, and that's what I would recommend. I would start with the higher intensity workouts, maybe more of those HIIT style workouts to incorporate carbs, and then also workouts that maybe you're using more muscle groups in. So full body workouts, or maybe like an intense leg day where you're using more, muscle groups. So you're going to have a little bit more of a calorie burn there, in terms of like, not necessarily, calorie burn in the sense of you're using more energy during those workouts because you are, they are going to be a little bit more intense, especially leg days and full body days versus if you were just doing like an upper body lift or maybe like an upper body isolation workout. You'll be using a lot less energy compared to the full body days and the leg days. So that would probably be a good place to put or to try carb cycling around, or heavy leg days, if you're doing lots of volume, full body days, things like that. And then also another just resource to give you in terms of carb ups and carb cycling. I did do a whole episode where I chatted about carb ups, carb cycling. So you can check that out. It's episode 18. I will link that in the show notes as well. And hopefully that will give you a little bit more insight as well into strategically placing carbs around your workouts and carb cycling in general. So hopefully that helps, and let me know if you have any follow-up questions. All right, next question. What should you do if you've compromised your metabolism from yo-yo dieting? Okay, so I think this question is stemming from the last, or I guess 2 weeks ago, a podcast that I recorded. It was another Q&A podcast, and I'll link it in the show notes, but I talked all about metabolic adaptation, which is basically just the concept of your body adapting as you get further and further into a deficit, and as you are, yo-yo dieting, which means that you've gone in and out of deficits for just like long periods of time. So like years on end, just constantly not letting your body recover from the previous deficit you've been in before going into another deficit or another diet. So metabolic adaptation is just the concept of your body adapting that, your metabolism adapting to constantly being in a deficit. And it's normal. Metabolic adaptation is normal. It's part of what happens when you lose weight and when you diet. So I'm not going to dive into all the things metabolic adaptation today because I did record that podcast a few weeks ago, which I'm going to link in the show notes. It's episode 62. It's called Fat Loss Plateaus, How to Know When to Stop Dieting, High Carbs Causing Sickness, which is a question, and more. So that's another Q&A episode, like I mentioned, but I dive into metabolic adaptation in detail. So I will link that in the show notes. Again, it's episode 62. So really, if you've been yo-yo dieting and kind of, like I said, constantly putting your body through periods of scarcity, or you're just constantly in a deficit without, having any recovery time or spending time at maintenance, or maybe even in a slight surplus, your metabolism can downregulate in the sense that, if your body is constantly sensing scarcity for long periods of time, again, with not enough time out of that deficit, it's going to fight back, and it's going to make losing body fat and losing weight harder. It's just because, our body is very smart. When it senses long periods of time of a deficit, long periods of time of scarcity or being in a deficit, it's going to fight back. Our body wants to maintain homeostasis as much as possible. And if you are constantly going through periods of being in a deficit, not being in a deficit, being in a deficit, and you're not giving yourself time to recover in between, then you are going to make it harder for yourself to really lose body fat. And that's just kind of in the sense of like your metabolism isn't broken. It's just adapted, especially if you are maybe if you've been consuming low calories for a very long period of time, your body's going to adapt to that caloric intake. And if you don't give it time to kind of ramp back up in the sense of feeding yourself more and giving yourself more fuel and spending time at maintenance, then again, you're going to make it a lot harder for yourself. And so I would say, again, if you've constantly been in and out of deficit without any periods dedicated to just practicing maintenance, or again, even in a slight surplus, then that's where I would start. So I would say, commit to 6+ months of not being in a deficit. And you don't necessarily need to go into a surplus, but just commit to time spent at maintenance, right? Like at your maintenance intake. And maybe focus on different goals instead of fat loss. Maybe focus on a performance goal or a goal to build more muscle, or maybe you're focused on more like self-care practices or mindset goals or something at work, something else besides just focused on fat loss. And when it comes to setting goals in other areas of your life, I actually did record another podcast a few weeks ago all about goal setting. So I'll link that one in the show notes too. I believe it was episode 64, diving into all things like goal setting in the sense of not just with like your body composition, but also with, your relationships, your mindset, performance, things like that. So definitely check that out, episode 64. And then another thing I would think about, if you feel like you've just been going through periods where you've been yo-yo dieting for so long and maybe you haven't gotten the results that you've wanted, and it's just been going on for a long period of time, and you're kind of going through this like cycle where you just continue to spin your wheels, I would definitely recommend investing in a coach, or someone that can help you see things from an outside perspective, and someone who can help you stay accountable to what you're doing on a daily basis and really help guide you, right? And I think that's something that, and I talk about this all the time, but that's one of the best decisions I've personally made in the past few years, is hiring my own coach and really just investing in myself, because there's nothing else that compares to it. There's nothing else that compares to the support that you get on a daily, basis, the accountability that you get, that, like I said, that outside perspective looking in, someone who can see things that maybe you don't personally see. And this happens all the time with myself and my coach, and also with my clients as well. So I would say, if you've been spinning your wheels for a while, then maybe it's time to invest in yourself, invest in a coach. And if you want to work with me, you can always apply for one-on-one coaching. You can go to metflexlife.com/apply. I will link that in the show notes. But again, my biggest advice for this, if you've been, if you feel like you have a compromised metabolism, in the sense that you've been yo-yo dieting for a while, you've been constantly in a deficit, or at least in a deficit for periods of time that you haven't given yourself time to recover from, then I would really, really encourage you to just spend, 6+ months at maintenance, not dieting, not being in deficit, get your body out of that kind of sense of scarcity and into a place where you can just, maintain, and maybe even look like working with a coach, you can work on reverse dieting, bringing your calories up in a, strategic way, where you're not just consuming tons more calories and maybe gaining weight, but you're doing it strategically with an actual process behind it, right? And you have someone helping you and guiding you through that. I think that is probably where I would start for sure. So again, if you are interested in applying for coaching, or if you're someone listening to this and you feel like you've been spinning your wheels for a while, trust me, I've been there. It's something that a lot of us, go through. It's part of human nature. Like, we feel like we can do all these things on our own, and then it gets to the point where, maybe we realize we can't, and that's when it's time to ask for help. And there's nothing wrong with that. So anyway, I'll link that application in the show notes, and hopefully that answered your question. All right, next question. Do plant fibers help or hinder recovery from endometriosis? Okay, so if you don't know what endometriosis is, it's a pretty common health problem in women specifically, and it gets its name from the word endometrium, which is just the tissue that normally lines the uterus, or the womb as people refer to it. So endometriosis basically happens when tissue that's similar to the lining of the uterus actually grows outside of your uterus on different areas of your body where it obviously doesn't belong. So like your ovaries, abdomen, bowel, places like that. And when it comes to plant fibers, like for the question, do plant fibers help or hinder recovery from endometriosis? I think there is. Just based off my research, there's been mixed research on this. So some people say that high fiber foods like veggies and fruits can be beneficial for endometriosis, and others say that they're not. And there's a lot of anecdotal research, I guess you could say, on this too, with fiber helping some people and then it not helping other people. So again, I think this question is hard to answer because there is so much mixed research, and especially anecdotal research as well. But I think that, and I actually asked Dr. Paul Saladino this question because I had him on a few weeks ago, and we talked all about fiber, and we talked all about the plant toxicity spectrum. So I would say, I can't give a yes or no answer to this question because I don't think there is a yes or no answer. I think that maybe if you want to learn a little bit more about fiber and dive a little bit deeper into that, and kind of take your own conclusions away from the episode that I did with Dr. Paul Saladino, I think that would be a great place to start. So I'm going to link that episode in the show notes. It's episode 61, All Things Carnivore with Dr. Paul Saladino. Again, we take a deep dive into all things fiber. We talk about the plant toxicity spectrum, and I think you'll learn a lot from that episode, and to be able to take away a few different points that might get you thinking, how your specific, in terms of the symptoms that you have, and whether or not you're eating these specific foods, how they're affecting you. for yourself, because again, this is very individualized, I think, and that's why we don't have a yes or no answer. There's no black and white answer to this. So I would say, yeah, definitely check out that episode with Dr. Paul Saladino. Again, I will link it in the show notes, episode 61. All right, last question today. When is the next round of the Keto-for-Women program? Okay, so the next round will probably be in spring 2021. I'm not exactly sure the exact date that's going to start, but it will probably be like end of January or beginning to mid-February. Also, if you don't know what the Keto-for-Women program is, it's basically my signature program where I take women who have either struggled with fat loss specifically, or they've been following a ketogenic diet for a long time and they've come to a plateau and they're looking to kind of level up and either get past this plateau or start to look at the bigger picture side of things in terms of not just, macros and exercise, but also lifestyle factors and accountability and mindset, and learning more about, what comes after keto, right? So a lot of us and a lot of women tend to, have really great results from keto in the beginning. And then sometimes it gets to the point where the results aren't coming anymore and it's time to kind of take a different route or try something new. And so really this program is basically teaching women how to become more metabolically flexible in the sense of getting out of the strict keto mindset and really focusing on how to reach their goals and achieve their goals with a sustainable long-term approach to a metabolically flexible lifestyle. So that's really what the program is. It's a 3-month program. I'm going to link the description in the show notes to my website. And if you're interested in joining the next round, which will be the 4th round, again, that will be in spring 2021, you can go to the link in the show notes, or you can just go to metflexlife.com/keto-for-women, and you can get on the waiting list to sign up for the next round. So this is a very exclusive, like each round is very exclusive, meaning that there's only, there's a set amount of women that are, allowed into it, just because it's very, we work one-on-one together. We work in a small group. It's a very close-knit group. And so yeah, it's very exclusive, and there is a waiting list. So if you want to jump on that waiting list for the next round, you can go to the link in the show notes. And if you don't want to wait until that program, launches, or if you are looking for one-on-one coaching, you can always apply for coaching. Again, you can go to metflexlife.com/apply to apply to work one-on-one with me. And yeah, so if you're interested in the Keto-for-Women program, definitely stay tuned. I will announce as it gets closer when the next round will be and the official start date. All right, that's all the questions we have for today. Again, shout out to our sponsor, UCAN. If you want to check out UCAN, you can go to the link in the show notes, or just go to www.ucan.co/METFLEXLIFE to learn more about their products, and you can use the discount code METFLEXLIFE for 20% off. Again, that will all be linked in the show notes. And that's all I got for you today. Let me know if you have any questions for future Q&A episodes. You can always email me or message me on Instagram, and I'll be happy to answer them. All right, I'll talk to you next time.